Hi, my name is Stacy. I used to be 5'8". I'm a blonde in every sense of the word. I don't claim to be a rocket surgeon. There was one thing I was really good at: shoplifting. I was stealing things since I was a small child. I got really good at it. Don't blame my parents. I kept it from them even back then. I feel so guilty for doing it, especially after my dad died in the plague. It took only 3 weeks, and half the men in the world were gone. We lost so many police, firefighters, farmers, doctors. Society went to hell. Um, it went further into hell than it already was. My dad died in that plague, and I was a daddy's girl. There's still a hole in my heart from his passing. With so many dead, there was war. Not just in foreign lands, but in our streets. We lost a lot of the women and 20% more of the men. The losses brought an end to the fighting, but not to the need. There were more mouths to feed than there were people to grow food. Prices went up on everything. There were more jobs than employees. Crime exploded. That's when they came up with they started shrinking people. At first, it was just volunteers. They got an easy life. They took buildings and housed thousands of women in the tiny little cities inside those buildings. They didn't shrink any of the men. There weren't enough of them left. I didn't volunteer. I was still making a living stealing from my mom and my sisters. My brother survived the sickness but died in the war. My mom by then knew I was a thief. Since I kept food on the table, she didn't care. If only I just stole food. By this point, I was 19, and what started as a thrill was now an addiction. I shoplifted everything, including things that didn't make sense. That's a story for another time. Crime was so bad that Madam President declared martial law. The shrinking was now inflicted on criminals. The minor criminals became tinies, the size of dolls. They were given to their families for safekeeping. The criminals in the middle were called specks. They sometimes got back to their families and sometimes didn't. The smallest tinies were called micros. They were the size of bugs. Their families never saw them again. I didn't think much about that when I was stealing. But 3 times in a row in rapid succession, I got caught shoplifting. The third time, I stole groceries. Thank God they made it to my mom, and the police didn't try to recover it. But I was taken in cuffs and hauled off to the detention center. Trials were done by inquisitors. 3 stony-faced women with their hair pulled back in ponytails so tight they seemed to dig into their skull. Each woman wore glasses too. They found footage of me stealing from dozens of stores. So they didn't buy my story of trying to feed my family. I was convicted to shrinking. They took me and dozens of other convicted women to a white-walled room with concrete floors. They didn't line us up. They didn't listen to the women crying or beg for mercy. Panels opened up on the wall at the far side of the room. 6 big glowing guns fired and light filled the room, and it felt like I was falling as the ceiling got further and further away. In minutes, we were a crowd of human bugs running around frantically. Then the floor started to lift under us like a ramp. The far wall opened. We slid out of the building and outside onto what I guess was asphalt. When you're a micro, nothing looks right anymore. It was like a river of black concrete with holes and cracks everywhere. I'm sure women fell into some of them. I smelled food, sugar and bread. There were boulders lying everywhere, or there were crumbs. I realized in a few pools of water. I thought someone kind had put food and water out for us. I started to eat those crumbs alongside others. Then the birds came. They hadn't put the crumbs out to be nice. They wanted us to get eaten by the birds. I ran from the crumb just as a sparrow landed and descended on the crumb. Two women who were holding on were drawn into the bird's beak, and down they went with the crumb. So I started to run. Not every bird cared about the crumbs. Some were just eating every woman they could catch. I got out of the area to find myself wandering on a sidewalk, I guess. Occasionally, a shoe landed nearby, followed by a pillar of a leg. The passage of time faded. There was no place safe to sit or rest. Occasionally, I found a crumb of food or a pool of water. My odds of survival as a micro were almost zero. And then there was a windy day. I was little more than a fleck of dust, and I was swept into the air. I drifted for hours and passed through the automatic doors of a department store. I landed on the floor with shoes crashing down around me and fell to my knees too tired to cry. I thought I was dead. Then something enormous crashed down in front of me. It almost landed on me. After a moment, I saw it was a cell phone. A giant hand grabbed it. I followed the hand up to a face. It was a man I hadn't seen it. I hadn't seen a man in months. His eyes were on me. I didn't think he knew I was there, but after pocketing his phone, he reached for me. I didn't care if he killed me. This was a living hell, and I couldn't have escaped him anyway. His fingers closed on me. I felt myself lifted. He put something under me and dropped me through an opening. I was in an empty Tic Tac container. I licked the sugar off the side. I was so hungry. He took me home and put me in a terrarium. He set up filled with clover and dandelions. I wasn't going to die that day. After eating some of the food and drinking the water he set out, I slept in a little hut he made for me. This isn't my dream come true, but I could live with this. Most importantly, I get to live.